the assignment of responsibility for performance, review, revision, and/or approval of the procedure. You have to identify the records, and for inspection activities, the frequency of observations or inspections and how those observations or inspections are documented. Let's first discuss the contract review process. So what is contract review? It is a process of reviewing the bid documents, proposal, contract documents, and your organization's resources. Why do we perform a contract review? We do it to minimize risk. And I'm going to stop there just for half a second because you're going to see this to minimize risk throughout the session. I promise you I won't keep repeating it. I'll just click through it. But I absolutely need you to know that it's not risk. To ensure the contract documents coincide with the bid documents in your proposal. Pretty simple, right? It's done to ensure that all parties are on the same page and that you have the resources and capabilities to complete the work as specified in the contract documents. Now let's address some of the normative requirements that drives this process. The standard 1.6 contract document review and communication says a documented procedure shall be developed for contract and project specification review. The procedures shall require these reviews for each project, and the review shall begin no later than the acceptance of the responsibility for performing the work. It's usually the execution of the contract. Code of Standard Practice 3.1 says the structural design documents shall clearly show or note the work that is to be performed and shall give the following information with sufficient dimensions to accurately convey the quantity and complexity of the structural steel to be fabricated. This would include the size, section, material grade, and location of members and other information. This is to enable you to come up with an accurate bid. 9.1 of the Code of Standard Practice says, specifically 911 says, for contracts that stipulate a lump sum price, the work that is required to be performed by the fabricator and erector shall be completely defined in the contract documents. Shouldn't be any question. Now let's look at an informative reference from the commentary of 1.6 of the standard. Ideally, the review should begin during the project estimation or bid process. Okay. And for your viewing pleasure, I've put together a summary of those normative references. On to purchasing. What are some of the typical roles for the purchasing department? Provide pre-bid pricing and information regarding the availability of project materials. Gather product data or information to submit for approval or for record purposes. Evaluate suppliers and subcontractors. Execute written purchasing documents, also known as purchase orders, which describe project materials and the need for required quality reports. It's to maintain quality reports such as material test reports, certificates of conformance for compliance. Why should purchasing be involved in the pre-bid process? I'll tell you why. Number one is to minimize risk. It's to ensure that the bid includes accurate material pricing. It's to ensure that specified products are readily or commercially available, or to gather intel on materials that are not readily available. Why gather product submittals? Is that risk again? It's required in the specifications as a line item submittal. It's to attain written approval for project specified materials or products. So why do we evaluate those suppliers and subcontractors? Minimize that risk. Help remove unworthy, unreliable sources in which you procure your materials and services from. It ensures that a system is in place for others to select from an approved source of suppliers or subcontractors in the absence or replacement of routine purchasing personnel. Sometimes people go on vacation. There should be a system in place where people can select from an approved source. Why write purchasing documents? Risk. Ensure that purchase materials or services are clearly described in writing. To request the required quality reports, such as material test reports, CFCs.
Time. did something.
To assist receiving personnel in confirming receipt of project specified and approved materials and services. And because it is a contract between you and the supplier or subcontractor, which you won't need unless there's an issue, and then you need it.
That does not surprise me.
Why maintain quality reports? Risk. Have records that confirm purchase materials meet project specification requirements, such as an ASTM requirement, testing, place of origin. These records need to be made available for the engineer record, and/or it's required by the specifications to be submitted. Here's some of those normative requirements that drives this process. 110 of the standard says a documented procedure shall be developed to ensure that subcontractors and suppliers provide contracted services and materials conforming to project requirements. 110.1 of the standard says purchasing documents shall clearly describe subcontracted work, purchase materials and services ordered in written purchasing documents. This information shall include, but shall not be limited to, type of service, material, class, grade, other unique identification, applicable specs, drawings, process requirements, inspection instructions, and any witness points, delivery instructions and date, required quality reports, certified test reports, and certificates of conformance for compliance of purchased materials. Those are shalls. 110.2 of the standard for selection of subcontractor and supplier says you have to have a documented procedure shall be developed. It describes how the certified company conducts initial and ongoing evaluation of all subcontractors and suppliers. Subcontractors and suppliers shall be evaluated, shall be selected on the basis of their ability to meet subcontract requirements, management system requirements, the applicable requirements of the standard, and the requirements of the approved construction documents and reference standards. Subcontractors and suppliers shall be evaluated. At a minimum, their quality and timely proper delivery shall be part of the evaluation process. What does the Code of Standard Practice have to say in 5.1? No materials, unless otherwise noted in the contract documents, the fabricator is permitted to order the materials that are necessary for fabrication when the fabricator receives contract documents that have been released for construction. Code of Standard Practice also says in 5.1.1, unless otherwise specified by means of special testing requirements in the contract documents, no testing shall be limited to those tests that are required for the material in the ASTM specifications indicated in the contract documents. Materials ordered to special material requirements shall be marked by the supplier as specified in ASTM A6, Section 12, or Section 18 in the 2019 version. Section 8 of the Code of Standard Practice, 8.2, inspection of mill material. Material test reports shall constitute sufficient evidence that the mill product satisfies the material requirements. I'm not going to read the rest of this because it's going to come into play a little later. AISC specification for structural steel buildings, 360, Chapter A, Section A3. Under materials says that structural steel materials says material test reports or reports of tests by the fabricator or testing laboratory shall constitute sufficient evidence of conformity with one of the ASTM standards listed in Section A3 1A. For hot rolled shapes, plates, bars, such tests shall be made in accordance with ASTM A6. Chapter N of 360 says you have to have some available documents. So the following documents shall be available in electronic or printed form for review by the engineer of record or their designee. Material test reports for structural steel, castings, forgings. Manufacturer certifications for fasteners. Test reports for anchor rods, threaded rods. Manufacturer certifications of welding consumables. Manufacturer certifications for headed stud anchors. And product data sheets for welding, filler, metals, and fluxes. ASTM A6 provides some ordering information as appropriate, such as ASTM product specification. This information should be in your purchasing documents. And Name of structural product, plate, shape, bar, shape designation or size, grade, class, type, condition, quantity, length. ASTM A6 section 10.1, all tests shall be conducted in accordance with test methods and definitions in A370. What is ASTM A370? It's the standard test methods and definitions for mechanical testing of steel products. 1.1 says these test methods cover procedures and definitions for the mechanical testing of steel, stainless steel, and related alloys. ASTM A6, section 12, provides permitted variations in dimensions and weight. And here is a summary of those normative references that drives that process. Let's move on to receiving. What role does the receiving department have? Review the delivery paperwork, verify receipt of materials, inspect the materials for conformance, document non-conformances, and properly offload and store or stage materials. So why do we review the paperwork? To minimize that risk. To ensure that the bill of lading or delivery ticket matches the information listed on the purchase order. Why verify the receipt of materials? Risk is to ensure that the received material matches the information listed on the purchase order. Why inspect materials? To ensure that received materials conform to the project-specific requirements as stated on the purchase order, which includes, but is not limited to, quality and proper identification. Why document non-conformances? Why you got to do that, right? It's to ensure that non-conforming materials do not enter the fabrication process. To use the information in these records as part of the initial and or ongoing evaluation process for suppliers and subcontractors. Why properly offload, store, stage those materials? You can't just push them off the truck, can you? To ensure that those received materials or products remain in the as manufactured or received condition as possible. Now let's look at those normative references that drives this process. The standard 110.3, verification of purchased product, materials, and services says the documented procedure for verification shall identify the activities necessary for ensuring that purchased products, materials, and services meets project requirements. 111 of the standard says that you have to create a documented procedure shall be developed for material identification. Structural steel materials shall be identified as stated in the Code of Standard Practice. We see that all the time. Here people talk about that. Welding consumables shall be identified in accordance with appropriate AWS specification and classification. Coating materials, excluding metallic coating, shall be identified on the container. Metallic coating shall be identified by composition and appropriate ASTM specification. Fasteners shall be stored in containers clearly identified by type, grade, size, number. 6.1 of the Code of Standard Practice says the fabricator shall be able to demonstrate by written procedure and actual practice a method for material identification. There's three different types of conditions here, A, B, and C. For A, for shop standard material, identification capability shall include shape designation. For material of grade other than shop standard grade material, shall include shape designation and material grade. For material ordered in accordance with ASTM supplement or other special material requirements in the contract documents, identification capability shall include shape designation, material grade, and heat number. Now, I know everybody's anxious to figure out, well, what is shop standard material? Code of Standard Practice says, unless an alternative system is established in the fabricator's written procedures, shop standard materials shall be as follows. So when somebody sees that Y flange laying in your yard, and it's only identified by section or size, it is assumed to be a 992, unless otherwise noted, okay? 113 of the standard says that a documented procedure shall be developed to ensure that completed work meets the requirements of contract documents. 113.2, it's new, receipt inspection says materials shall be compared to the purchase order requirements and the receiving documents. The receiver shall identify the material and quantity and check for visible shipping damages. The receiver shall inspect shapes and plates for obvious deviations from project requirements.
That matches.
114 of the standard calibration of inspection, measuring, and test equipment says a documented procedure shall be developed to calibrate and maintain inspection, measuring, and testing equipment.
Yeah.
Code of Standard Practice 512 has something to say. It says when mill material does not satisfy ASTM A6 tolerances, camber, profile, flatness, sweep, fabricators shall be permitted to perform corrective procedures, including the use of controlled heating and/or mechanical straightening, subject to the limitations of AISE 360.
Okay, I'm in your office.
Code of Standard Practice 8.2 says, it says fabricators shall make visual inspection of materials that are received from the mill, but need not perform any material tests unless the owner's designated representative for design specifies it in the contract documents. Here is that list of normative references.
I was just coming after that. So that was
So now we're going to get into some of the issues and the means to minimize those. At least I'm hoping that we are. The contract review. Issues from a deficient contract review process. Could be a missed opportunity to identify unavailable materials or products due to it being an odd-sized section or member as they may not be commercially available. It's failure to identify specified materials that are not available domestically. Missed opportunity to realize that your organization does not have the resources needed to perform the work as specified.
No, I mean.
So means to minimize some of those issues might be
They tell me, hey, I got it.
have a well-written, detailed, implemented documented procedure in place. I cannot emphasize enough to you when I say detailed and implemented, you have to have the procedure. It can't just be words in a book. It actually should provide those steps necessary to carry out a process to be consistent. Be sure that the purchasing department plays a role early in the contract review process, as they are the experts in the procurement of materials and can identify problematic material issues early in the process. Share the responsibility of the contract review process with other departments, requiring their input or sign-offs on processes in which they are responsible.
8 of them, 8 3/4. He's already got the 3/8.
And perform a thorough contract review to ensure that your organization has the resources such as, but not limited to, the people, the equipment, time in the production schedule, financing, bonding to complete the work as specified.
On 385.
One of those ones that are stacked up over there?
Yeah, with
There's
their
Going to
range,
purchasing.
range area?
that whole area is phase 1 beans.
Alright.
Yeah, so grab like 1 or 2.
Possible
beans,
issues from a deficient purchasing process.
End plate and the plates over
Break
there.
this into several categories here. Failure to submit product data sheets, what could possibly go wrong?
You well.
Unnecessary risk of making a product purchase prior to the approval process and then having it rejected. Absolutely can happen. You could have something that is specified in the documents, such as a coating, purchase the product, not submit the data sheets, and have it rejected because it's just one part of a coating system. Failure to meet line item requirements to specify required quality reports. Failure to properly evaluate suppliers and subcontractors, the next section we're going to talk about. Deliveries are different than what was advertised. Receipt of inferior materials or products. Risk of using the same subpar suppliers and subcontractors over and over again. Talk about the failure to write and transmit purchase orders to suppliers and subcontractors. Receipt of product that fails to meet project specified requirements, right? It's just verbal. Receipt of the wrong quantity of product. Failure to receive the required quality reports, if you had a conversation about. Receipt of processed material outside of allowable tolerances. Receipt of product that wasn't domestically manufactured. Receipt of materials beyond verbally agreed delivery date. How is that possible, right? Now, talk about a failure to receive, maintain, and submit required quality reports. There's no means to confirm material meets project specified requirements. Failure to meet a line item requirement to submit required quality reports. Got to look at that 5120 spec, usually in 1.3 or 1.4 is where you're going to find this submittal requirement. Means to minimize these issues. Again, have a well-written, left out the word detailed, and implemented documented procedure in place. Very crucial. Be sure that a comprehensive supplier subcontractor evaluation process is in place, and that material nonconformance reports are part of those evaluations, okay? Include all required data on purchase orders as listed in the standard, and also be sure that tolerances for any processed materials that are purchased, such as cut to size, rolled, form, shape, are included as well, as this will bolster receipt of materials or services within project allowable tolerances and will drive receipt inspections to specific criteria rather than assumed criteria for your receiving personnel. Be sure that the purchase order is transmitted and received by the supplier or subcontractor. Be sure that all purchasing personnel are well trained in the QMS procedures in which they are responsible. Increase the sampling of purchasing documents and interviews during your internal audit process to ensure that the finding is representative of the current process. You only spot check a couple of POs and they seem to be okay. That might not really be representative of the process. Let's move on to receiving. Possible issues from a deficient receiving process can't be receipt of wrong product or material, receipt of wrong quantity of material or product, receipt of processed materials outside the allowable tolerances, receipt of materials that do not meet specified requirements, damaged materials from improper offloading or staging, incomplete inspections, which could lead to a lack of identifying and documenting non-conforming material, which may end up being fabricated and maybe even delivered. Worst case scenario. So what are some of the means to minimize these issues? Have a well-written, detailed, implemented, documented procedure in place. Be sure receiving personnel are equipped with the right tools. And when I mean the right tools, provide them with the purchasing documents to compare to receiving documents, okay? If they have it at the time that they're receiving the product rather than later on, they might be able to make arrangements in a quicker manner to have a replacement material brought out. Provide them with calibrated measuring and testing equipment, such as a tape and square, right? If they are your receiving inspection personnel, they probably should have those types of pieces of equipment and they should be calibrated. Provide them with suitable moving, handling, and rigging equipment. Got to give them proper equipment. You got to give them slings, spreader bars, whatever is necessary to properly offload materials. Train them on relevant QMS procedures, as well as industry normative requirements, which includes, but is not limited to, receiving, material identification, inspection, ASTM permissible tolerances, supplier nonconformances, handling and rigging, storage, and include comprehension tests in your training. can only make it better. So, unfortunately, now I must share some of the possibilities of the harsh realities of what could happen if any of these or all of these processes are deficient. So I hate to share the doom and gloom on you, but I'm really trying to drive it home as to what some of these things could do. As you well know, it creates inefficiencies in your production based on stopping, starting, right? There's additional costs that could be incurred for replacement of fabricated damaged materials from the handling process or not having improper dunnage, withheld or delayed progress payments. Nobody wants to hear that, but it's the reality of things. Damaged relationships. You know, when you hold other people up, it damages relationships with general contractors, construction managers, suppliers, subcontractors, and erectors. Okay, nobody wants to deal with a problem. Delays in shop production, delays to the erector. These are all potential. Delays to the project schedule, which could lead to liquidated damages or even termination of contract. In a worst case scenario, it could be any combination of the above. Right? Now, be proactive and take control of your processes to minimize your risk. Linda?
All right, thank you, Dennis. We are going to go to our poll question. So, true or false? ASTM A6 provides valuable information related to the fabricator's purchasing process as well as their receipt inspection process. I'm going to go ahead and give everybody another second or two to get those answered. I think it's true. The majority, 91.7%.
Absolutely, sure. ASTM A6 absolutely provides valuable information related to the fabricator's purchasing process as well as the receipt inspection process. Second, I think it takes 6 weeks from now to post these publicly, and you know, when you have that opportunity, you can go back, look back at the session, and I've outlined what the normative criteria is that drives any one of these processes, and I also provide you that for ASTM A6, so it'll give you that information directly.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Doesn't look like we have any questions. Thank you very much, Dennis. And I just have one final announcement. So great things happen when students and their educators can be creative and pursue their interests. That's why the AIC Education Foundation is launching a variety of exciting new programs in 2021 and 2022, all designed to help